Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your day to join us. My friends, as I was coming into the studio this morning, I heard an interesting, exciting news broadcast that President Obama, yes, the president of the insolvent corporation that you know is the United States government, is going to bring forth to his budget, the 2014 budget, to the Congress. Interesting enough, that one of the highlights of this budget request is that they're going to cut Social Security and Medicare because of this entitlement programs. Now, don't you like how they play with the words with this? Understand what Social Security is. First of all, it is supposed to be and was set up as an insurance benefit to those of you who put into the benefit all your working lives. Now, how is it that so many people with different medical conditions, some fabricated, some real, are collecting your Social Security benefits? How is it that foreigners, including Mexican citizens that have never put into the system, are collecting your benefits? How is it that the welfare system and Medicaid system are not going to be touched? Actually, they're probably going to get COLA rises, cost of living allowance rises. But yet, who are they going to take from? You again, the working, productive, middle-class America that this government has waged war on with its actions, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. My friends, I think you've got to come to the understanding finally that not only is something wrong, but there is a war being waged against the middle class in this country. And don't forget, they have, if you've been watching this program, and we've read this to you verbatim too many times to count, that they actually have declared you the enemy with the 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act. They have declared the United States a battleground with the National Defense Authorization Act 2012. They have taken our money and put together what we know as FEMA camps, or as John Ashcroft, the former Attorney General of the United States, called them, internment camps. And when you look up the word interment, to rid of, to bury. And now, as you've been watching the program last week, we got into the information that the Department of Homeland Security has now purchased 2.316 billion with a B rounds of ammunition, 40 Smith hollow point. The military doesn't use 40 Smith. It's not even in their basic issue. And when a congressman came forward with this information and asked them about it, you know what they said? They said it was for training and target purposes. Now, we are trying to get to you, to broadcast to you through a mechanism that I don't understand because I'm not so computer savvy, the new desensitized Department of Homeland Security targets. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to broadcast this to you and show this to you. But if we're not able to, my friends, I invite you to go on the internet and punch in Department of Homeland Security desensitized targets, and what you are going to find will astound you. You are going to find that they have targets for target practice of children, of pregnant mothers, of mothers with children, elderly people, that they are going to be shooting at for target practice. And see, the boogeyman is not Osama bin Forgotten and his likes. The boogeyman and this whole thing has been geared to you, as we have said from the very, very beginning. This is the result of the Hegelian dialectic of 911. Create the crisis, get the emotional response you want from the people, and bring in the solution, which always strengthens their authority and weakens your liberties. And by the way, I may add, we wind up financing our own demise through the taxes and so forth that go through the need of the logistical support of this domestic security force. Not to mention what's going on with our military currently in 143 different nations throughout the world. And now we are expanding operations in and throughout Africa. As we do know, we've gone into Libya. Of course, we had to put the agent provocateurs in there first, being Al-Qaeda. Oh, I'm sorry, the media has sold them to you as Al-Qaeda. But now we're in Mali. And why are we in Mali? We're in Mali because Mali is the number 3 production of gold in the world. And now we are expanding ourselves into Africa. Very, very interesting. Our soldiers have become privateers. And if you're not familiar with that term, privateers are people that fight and wage war for booty. And booty, B-O-T-T-Y, is a legal term. And what it means is resources, gains, profits made by the mechanism of war. And that's exactly what our soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, and Coast Guardsmen are risking life and limb for, the profits of war. You know, and this isn't anything new in the history of our country. I remember some years ago, we read a good portion of the book, War is a Racket, by 2-time Congressional Medal of Honor Smedley Butler. And we read that book verbatim to you, and he got into the profit margins of all these companies and how he was fighting for the sugar industry down in the Dominican and so forth. Okay, so this is nothing new. And you know, it always amazes me, my friends, how through the mind control and through the indoctrination systems, as known as the public school system and the media and so forth, how they can subject the minds of poor people of one nation to go and wage war and kill the poor of another nation for the profits of the rich. And someday, I am hopeful that mankind, particularly Americans, because nobody, no nation is waging more war against our fellow man on this entire earth than the United States. So, before we get into our main discussion of our program today, which is going to be an outstanding article by Paul Craig Roberts, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And the title of his article is It Has Happened Here. I want to get into some, as I say, news that they have missed. And the headline here that I received, I actually went out and got this, and this is from a newspaper, The Guardian, in England. And are you ready for this, my friends? Biden calls for a new world order. This is April 6, 2013. Vice President Joe Biden threw caution to the wind Friday as he shockingly declared the affirmative task that we have now is to actually create a new world order. Let me read that again to you. This is the vice president of the insolvent corporation you call the United States government. This is Mr. Biden speaking. The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order. It's not to protect the Constitution. It's not to serve the people of the United States. It is to create a new world order, a novus ordo seclorum. Amazing. Why is this man not being brought up on treason charges? Okay. Now, I have been studying very, very strongly what's going on in Cyprus, and we're going to be doing a show probably next week once I have some more information that I am satisfied is accurate and correct. But I have come to the conclusion, my friends, in the studying that I've been doing, that Cyprus is the template. Cyprus is the template of all these central banks, the mechanism in which they are going to confiscate your wealth. Now, let me back that up with some thoughts. First of all, they have confiscated all the intrinsic wealth of this nation. And what I mean by intrinsic, it is tangible. Gold, silver, natural resources, and so forth. That's gone. For those of you old enough to remember, our money used to be backed by gold and silver. And for those of you who have been watching this program long enough, you know, because we have studied the coinage acts of this country, particularly during the founding era, that a dollar was 25.8 grains of gold and a 15-to-1 ratio of silver. That no longer exists. All of your gold and all of your silver has been usurpably confiscated through a private, foreign, for-profit banking corporation known as the Federal Reserve. Now, what is going on in Cyprus so far is that the people of Cyprus, their bank accounts have been confiscated to the tune of 60%. So if you want to speak in American terms, for every Federal Reserve note that you falsely believe are dollars, but for every Federal Reserve note that is in your banking account, not the government of Cyprus, the bankers have confiscated 60% of that accumulation, and they've used that money, are you ready for this? To purchase common stock of their faltering banks to benefit the stockholders of these failing banks. So Cyprus didn't get a bailout. Greece is not getting a bailout. The United States didn't get a bailout. Folks, we gave the bankers $28.3 trillion with a T dollars. Now we have to pay them an interest bond due on each one of them so-called dollars because they gave us permission to print it to give to them in the first place. But we don't have enough money. We don't have any money, excuse me, but we don't have enough budget entries or ledger entries to cover the Social Security and Medicare benefits that you have been putting into a system all your life. All your life. How much sweat equity have you put into Social Security and Medicare? And what's the big headline with Obama's new budget? We're going to cut Social Security and Medicare. We're not going to touch Medicaid and welfare. Generations, decades of dependence on your sweat equity. We're going to cut what you have been producing and putting into in good faith because you still believe that this insolvent corporation is a benevolent organization. Falsely so. So I'm going to be getting into Cyprus. I'm going to stop right there with that today because we are going to do a special show on Cyprus and what's going on. But do understand this, my friends. Cyprus is the template for what is coming to the rest of Europe and for what is coming to North America. Not just the United States. I'm talking Canada and the United States. Mark my words. I do not give predictions. As you know, I usually read things verbatim to you as I'm doing today, but you mark my words, my friends, this is coming to America. It's in their plans. I started studying a document yesterday that was put out by the Bank of England and leaked to an organization that I have a lot of faith in. I am fortunate enough to have my hands on that document. This is from the Bank of England itself. And I assure you, I am using their words when I tell you Cyprus is the template. Okay, this is an article put out by the journalist Michael Schneider. If you don't know who Michael Schneider is, he is a very active journalist in the state of Rhode Island. The global elite are very clearly telling us that they plan to raid our bank accounts. That is the headline. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I just want to do this real quick. Dutch Finance Minister Jeroen, and excuse me if I butcher this last name, Dijsselbloem is the president of Eurogroup, an organization of the Eurozone finance ministers that was instrumental in putting together the Cyprus deal. And he has said publicly that what has just happened in Cyprus, now listen to his words, will serve as a blueprint for future bank bailouts. Not national bailouts, my friends, as I just said to you. The United States didn't get a bailout with the 28.3 trillion. They got a bill. You got a bill. Folks, when you rob a bank, it's called a felony. It's called bank robbery. When the bank robs you, it's called a bailout. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. This is what is coming. Listen to this man's words. He is in charge of the Eurozone finance ministers. Now, are the Eurozone finance ministers government entities or are they banking entities? They are banking entities. They are in control. Do you remember 2 weeks ago, we read that statement to you verbatim from your Attorney General, Eric Holder? The banks are too big to prosecute? Listen to his words. Cyprus will serve as a blueprint for future bank bailouts. Folks, you keep thinking, and I hear this from people all my life, it'll never happen here. It'll never happen here. Well, folks, everything has happened here. And now they're preparing for the final culmination crisis. Mr. Snyder continues in his article, what that means is that when the chips are down, they are going to come after your money. So why should anyone put a large amount of money in the bank at this point? Perhaps you can make 1 or 2% on your money if you shop around for a real good deal. But there is also a chance that 60% or more of your money will be confiscated if the bank fails. Folks, I'm not going to go on with this article due to time's sake, because I do want to get into Mr. Roberts. But I want you to understand, my friends, quit thinking it'll never happen here. How much does it take for it to be in front of your face that you can say to yourself, my God, it not only is happening here, it has happened here. Okay. And if you think it's just they're going to go after your bank accounts, I want you to listen to this next article. This is a European website written by a Mac Slavo. The website is shtfpplan.com. And I'm going to read this verbatim to you. After the theft of up to 60% of deposits accounts in Cyprus, a move that was approved and applauded by EU finance ministers, can you say the same people that just said to you in their own writing that Cyprus is the blueprint? My friends, when I'm reading this document from the Bank of England, they are calling Cyprus the template. And if you don't know what a template is, if you're a construction worker or a woodworker or any kind of fabricator, you understand what a template is. You make one copy of your original, whatever you're going to duplicate down the road. That is your template. This is what you're going to follow for the rest of the pattern that you're developing. So these very same finance ministers, after the theft of 60% of deposits accounts in Cyprus, a move that was approved and applauded by EU finance ministers, many Europeans who understand that the government will soon be coming for their savings as well are rapidly moving to extricate themselves from the global banking cartel. One big error here, my friends. It's not the government coming to get their money. It is the international bankers that have developed this crisis from day one. To do so, they are shifting paper assets and digital deposit accounts into tangible goods, intrinsic valued items. One such tangible asset of last resort is gold, believed to be by many to be the only currency that will survive the worldwide debasement of fiat paper currency like the US dollar, etc., euro, etc. Now, my friends, we have gotten into how our lack of money is a fiat medium of exchange. It has no base of value, no intrinsic value. Nothing is backing it up but your sweat equity. Federal Reserve note. My friends, what's a note? An acknowledgement of debt in any law dictionary. That's what a note is. Do you remember we read verbatim to you how from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition? We've read this many times. Money, and we read the definition for you for money, and then at the very end, what does it say? The definition of money does not encompass debt or notes. A note is an acknowledgement of debt. That's why there's two signatories on what you think is a dollar that is a note, because one's the creditor, one's the debtor. And you are the surety for that debt. Let us continue here. But just because you own gold doesn't mean that you're safe from the prying eyes and thieving hands of the government/bankers. The following report from Italy highlights the growing trend in government confiscation of precious metals, investment assets, and critical resources. When one obviously panicked family looking to get out of harm's way before the contagion spreads and financial Armageddon takes hold to attempt to cross into Switzerland, customs agents at the border found more than they expected. After questioning the family and inspecting their vehicle, the police found 1 ton of gold hidden in the floorboards. That's nearly 50 million in gold. Would you like to guess? I won't even finish reading this because I think you're getting the point. Guess what happened to that 1 ton or $50 million of gold that this family had for themselves and transferred all their debt instruments into intrinsic value. You got it. It was confiscated. Now, let us go on. We hear an awful lot about how the job market's getting better. Unemployment is down. Let's get into why unemployment is down. This again comes from journalist Michael Schneider. More than 101 million working age Americans do not have a job. That's the title. The job recovery is a complete and total myth. The percentage of the working age population in the United States that had a job in March of 2013 was exactly the same as it was all the way back into March of 2010. In addition, as you will see below, there are now more than 101 million working age Americans that do not have a job. But even though the unemployment level in the United States has consistently remained very low, and he's having fun with this, over the past 3 years, the Obama administration keeps telling us that unemployment is actually going down. In fact, they tell us that unemployment rate has declined from a peak of 10% all the way down to 7.6%. Fabricated lies. Fabricated lies. The actual unemployment rate in this country, when you look at private industry analysis, is at 21%. And I have read some at 23%. And of course, if you remember on this program, we got into the U6 and the U3 and how they lie to us. It's just like the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. They keep that low, like leaving out food and fuel and so forth, so they don't have to give people on Social Security their COLA raises, cost of living allowance. And they tell us that in March, the unemployment rate fell by 0.1%, even though only 88,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy. But it takes at least 125,000 jobs a month to keep up with population growth. So how in the world, are they coming up with these numbers? Well, the reality is that the entire decline in the unemployment rate over the past 3 years can be accounted for by the reduction in the size of the labor force. Now, you may be confused right now, and he's going to try to clear this up for you, and then I'm going to make sure you understand it. In other words, the Obama administration is getting unemployment to go down by pretending that millions upon millions of unemployed Americans simply do not want jobs anymore. We saw this once again in March. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 600,000 Americans dropped out of the labor market during that month alone. That pushed the labor force participation rate down to 63.3%, which is the lowest it has been in more than 30 years. Now, you're probably saying, okay, Tom, what does this all mean? And what do they mean that 600,000 Americans dropped out of the labor force market during the month of March? Think of that, my friends. The economy created only 88,000 jobs in the month of March, according to them. And I'm going to tell you another thing. I haven't got the statistics in front of me, but I have been following this quite heavily over the last 3 to 4 years. I would reckon to say that probably somewhere between 35 and 40% of them jobs are private sector jobs, because the greatest growth in our economy has been government sector jobs. Not private growth, government growth. So what do they mean that 600,000 people just dropped out of the job market? Well, what does the word market mean? The market is someplace where you go to buy wares, or you go in search of wares. A market is where you have a need and you go to that place to facilitate that need. So the job market is exactly that. The need being that people need jobs. The market being the avenue, the place, no matter what mechanism it is, walking in the door, phone calls, email, computer, whatever. Looking in the paper for help wanted ads, all this type of stuff. That consists of the market. But they're saying that 600,000 Americans in the month of March just decided we don't want to do that no more. What? They don't want to eat no more? They don't want a roof over their head no more? They don't want running water underneath that roof no more, or heat? No. Here's what the government's talking to you about. My friends, 600,000 people no longer qualify for unemployment benefits. So the government does not include them in their unemployment statistics. That is how they are selling to you the unemployment has come down. That's how they're selling it to you. Because they're telling you 600,000 people dropped out of the job market. Are they saying to you 600,000 people gained employment? No. They're telling you only 88,000 gained employment in that month. So if 600,000 people no longer qualified for unemployment benefits and we only created 88,000 jobs, how did unemployment go down? Unemployment went down because we're talking about skewed, fabricated formulas to come up to sell you. That's how unemployment went down. Do you understand what I'm saying? That if you no longer qualify, even though you've been paying into this benefit since you've been working, unemployment benefits, the government no longer basically considers you unemployed. Do they consider you working? No. They just don't consider you unemployed anymore. So we're not going to count you in our unemployment figures. Continuing. If things were getting better, there would not be more than 101 million working-age Americans without a job. So exactly where does this statistic come from? Well, the following explains where they get that number. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 11,742,000 working age Americans that are officially unemployed. When you look at the amount of Americans that are truly unemployed, that number goes to 89,967,000, bringing you obviously to the 101 million. So you see what I'm saying here? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, officially there are 11,742,000 unemployed Americans in this country. Read unemployed as collecting unemployment benefits. Also, according to the labor statistics, there are 89,967,000 Americans not in the labor force, not having jobs. But they are not included in the unemployment rate, my friends, because they are not collecting unemployment benefits anymore. So we have 11,742,000 that are considered unemployed because they are collecting the benefits. And think of this number, my friends. We have 89,967,000 that are not collecting unemployment benefits and do not have a job. Absolutely staggering numbers. Staggering. Now I want you to think of this. If there's a little over 300 million people, illegal immigrants and everything else, including in this equation of people who are in this country, and you have over 101 million people unemployed, and subtracting the ones that are 15 years old and younger, where do you think the unemployment rate really truly is? Makes more sense, as private industry tells us that the true unemployment rate in this country is between 21 and 23%. Okay, let's get to this article by Mr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Undersecretary of the Treasury. You may recognize his name. We've quoted him before, but he is literally the father of Reaganomics. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to read verbatim, and I'll try to keep my comments to a minimum. The Bush regime's response to 9/11 and the Obama regime's validation of this response have destroyed accountability democratic government in the United States. So much unaccountability power has been concentrated in the executive branch that the U.S. Constitution is no longer an operable document. Whether a person believes the official story of 9/11, which rests on unproven government assertions, or believes in the documented evidence provided by a large number of scientists, first responders, structural engineers, architects, the result is the same. But I can't just go by that. I just can't go by that. Listen to what he's telling you. This man's in the know, my friends. This man is in the know. Okay? Listen to his words. Whether a person believes the official story of 9/11, which rests on unproven government assertions, or believes the documented evidence provided by a large number of scientists, first responders, structural engineers, and architects, the result is the same. 9/11 was to create an open-ended war on terror and a police state. First of all, you've got to read between the lines here. They're lying to you. So we know that 19 supposed terrorists didn't outsmart the CIA, NSA, DOD with their trillions of dollars of budgets and technology. We know that a man named Osama bin Laden didn't orchestrate this attack from a cave in Bora Bora, Afghanistan, where they didn't have any communications. They couldn't even make a film that wasn't so grainy that you could make out Osama bin Forgotten. And we also know, by the way, that this man was on dialysis every 3 to 4 days. It's ironic. Think of that. No electricity, living in a cave in Bora Bora, Afghanistan, coordinated with the greatest attack ever launched against the United States. Yet, he was able to get dialysis in this cave. And what Mr. Roberts is telling you, that the government is lying to you. So then you have to ask yourself, who did perpetrate 9/11? And that brings us right back, my friends, to the Hegelian dialectic. Crisis, reaction, solution. It is extraordinary that so many Americans believe that it can't happen here when it already has. We have had a decade of highly visible evidence of the construction of a police state, the Patriot Acts, illegal spying on Americans in violation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the initiation of wars of aggression, war crimes under the Nuremberg Standard based on intentional lies, the Justice Department's concocted legal memos justifying the executive branch's violation of domestic and international law against torture, the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens in violation of the constitutionally protected rights of habeas corpus, which no longer exist, and due process, the use of secret evidence and secret expert witnesses who cannot be cross-examined against defendants in trials, the creation of military tribunals in order to evade federal courts, secret legal memos giving the president authority to launch preemptive cyber attacks on any country without providing evidence that the country constitutes a threat, and the Obama regime's murder of U.S. citizens without evidence or due process. As if this were not enough, the Obama regime now creates new presidential powers by crafting secret laws, refusing to disclose the legal reasoning on which these asserted powers rest. In other words, laws now originate in secret executive branch memos and not in acts of Congress. Congress? We don't need no stinking Congress. He's going along with that movie. I forget the name of the movie. Despite laws protecting whistleblowers and the media and the U.S. military code, which requires soldiers to report war crimes, whistleblowers such as CIA agent John Kiriakou, media such as Julian Assange, and soldiers such as Bradley Manning are persecuted and prosecuted for revealing U.S. government crimes. The criminals go free, and those who report the crimes are punished. The justification for the American police state is the war on terror, a hoax, listen to his words, a hoax kept alive by the FBI sting operations. Normally speaking, a sting operation is when a policewoman poses as a prostitute in order to ensnare a John, or a police officer poses as a drug dealer or user in order to ensnare drug dealers. The FBI sting operation goes beyond these victimless crimes that fill up U.S. prisons. My friends, a lot of U.S. prisons are privately owned. And when they sign the contracts with these state entities, they actually, in the contracts, have to keep prison populations at certain percentages. Nothing about justice and truth. This is about profit and corporations. They actually have to keep prison populations at certain percentages for profit. The FBI sting operations are different. They are just as victimless as no plot ever happens, but the FBI doesn't pose as bomb makers for terrorists who have a plot but lack the weapon. Instead, the FBI has the plot and looks for a hapless or demented person or group, or for a Muslim enraged over the latest Washington insult to him or his religion. When the FBI locates its victim, its agents approach the selected perpetrator pretending to be Al-Qaeda or some such and ply the selected perpetrator with money, the promise of fame, or threats until the victim signs on the FBI's plot and is arrested. Trevor Aronson, in his book, The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's War on Terrorism, documents that the FBI has so far concocted over 150 terrorist plots, and that almost all of the other terrorist cases are cases unrelated to terrorism, such as immigration, with a terror charge tacked on. The prostitute American media doesn't ask why. If there is so much real terrorism requiring an American war against it, the FBI has to invent. Why does the FBI have to invent and solicit terrorist plots? And the other thing I would like to add here, my friends, why are the borders wide open? Why are we able to maintain 28,000 troops in Korea on their border since 1952, but we can't put 4,000 on our border to secure it if we have this big threat? Neither does the media inquire how the Taliban, which resist the U.S. invasion and attempted occupation of Afghanistan, fighting the U.S. superpower to a standstill after 12 years, come to be designated as a terrorist. Nor does the U.S. prostitute media want to know how tribesmen in remote regions of Pakistan came to be designated as terrorists, deserving the U.S. drone attacks on its citizens, its schools, its medical clinics of the country, with which the U.S. is not at war. Instead, the media protects and perpetuates the hoax that has given America the police state. The American media has become the Leni Riefenstahl, as has Hollywood with the anti-Muslim propaganda film Zero Dark 30. This propaganda film is a hate crime that spreads Islamophobia. Nevertheless, the film is likely to win awards and to sink Americans into both tyranny and a 100-year war in the name of fighting the Muslim threat. 100-year war? Gee, why does that ring a bell to me? I'm going to tell you why. Because Vice President Dick Cheney said this will be a 100-year war. What I learned many years ago as a professor is that movies are important molders of American attitudes. Once, after giving a thorough explanation of the Russian Revolution that led to communist rule, we financed that, a student raised his hand and said, "That's not the way it happened in the movie." At first, I thought he was making a witty joke. But then I realized that he thought that the truth resided in the movie, not in the professor who was well versed in the subject. Ever since I have been puzzled how the U.S. has survived for so long, considering the ignorance of its population. Americans have lived in the power of the U.S. economy. Now that this power is waning, sooner or later, Americans will have to come to terms with reality. I can only hope that we do this before reality is a hardened road. It is a reality that will be unfamiliar to them. Some Americans claim that we have had police states during other war times and that once the war on terror is won, the police state will be dismantled. Others claim that the government will be judicious in its use of the power, and that if you are doing nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. These are reassurances from the deluded. The Bush-Obama police state is far more comprehensive than Lincoln, Wilson's, or Roosevelt's, and the war on terror is open-ended and is already 3 times longer than that of World War II. The police state is acquiring squatters' rights. Moreover, the government needs the police state in order to protect itself from accountability for its crimes, its lies, and squandering of taxpayers' money. New precedents for executive power have been created in conjunction with the Federalist Society, which, independent of the war on terror, advocates unitary executive theory, which claims the president has powers not subject to check by Congress and the judiciary. In other words, the president is a dictator if he prefers to be. The Obama regime is taking advantage of this Republican theory. The regime has used the Republican desire for a strong executive outside the traditional checks and balances, together with the fear factor, to complete the creation of the police state. My friends, we've talked about the Hegelian dialectic: problem, reaction, solution. Create a crisis, get the emotional response from the people. I will tell you, the best response that works for them, and George Hagel talked about this, is fear. Whether it's fear from a fabricated enemy or even fear from the unknown, fear is a mighty motivator. As Lawrence M. Stratton and I documented in our book, The Tyranny of Good Intentions, prior to 9/11, law as a shield of the people was already losing ground to law as a weapon in the hands of the government. If the government wanted to get you, there were few, if any, barriers to a defendant being framed and convicted, least of all a brainwashed jury fearful of a crime. I cannot say whether the U.S. just us system has ever served justice better than it has served the ambition of prosecutors. Already in the 1930s and 40s, U.S. Supreme Court Justice George Sutherland and U.S. Attorney General Robert Jackson were warning against prosecutors who sacrifice fair dealing to build up statistics of success. Certainly, it is difficult to find in the ranks of federal prosecutors today Jackson's prosecutor who tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth and not victims, who serves the law and not factional purposes, and who approaches his task with humility. Folks, just listen to the political advertisements during election for the Attorney Generals of different states. They'll give you their success rate. Is it the success rate on finding truth and fact and having justice served? No. It's the success rate on prosecutions and people they have either placed in jail, seized their property, or extracted wealth from. Just consider the wrongful conviction of Alabama's Democratic Governor Don Singelman by what apparently was a Karl Rove plot to rid the South of Democratic governors. Now, my friends, this guy, see, this is one thing I like about Mr. Roberts. He's beyond the divide paradigm. He was in a Republican, he was with Ronald Reagan, who was obviously Republican administration. But he's beyond that. He understands what the Republicans and Democrats are the same entity, and that's the left-right divide paradigm, to keep us separate, to keep us from unifying as one educated, coordinated force. The Democratic Obama regime has not investigated this false prosecution or given clemency to its own innocents. Of course not. There's no difference between the two. It's about protecting the system. Remember how quickly Bush removed the prison sentence of Cheney's operative who revealed the name of the CIA undercover agent? The Democrats are a coward and cowardly political party, fearful of justice and as much a part of the corrupt police state as any Republican. Today, the purpose of a prosecution is to serve the prosecutor's career and that of the party that appoints him or her. A prosecutor's career is served by high conviction rates, which require plea bargains in which the evidence against a defendant is never tested in court or before a jury, and by a high-profile cases which can launch a prosecutor into a political career, such as Rudy Giuliani achieved with his frame-up of Michael Milken. Glenn Greenwald explained how Internet freedom advocate Aaron Swartz was driven to his death by the ambition of two federal prosecutors, U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz and Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Heyman, who had no aversion to destroying an innocent person with ridiculous and trumped-up charges in order to advance their careers. Boy, does Representative James Traficant of Ohio come to my mind with that statement. Of course, Mr. Traficant's mistake was claiming, and rightfully so, on the congressional floor, in the congressional record, that we are a bankrupt corporation. It is rare for a prosecutor to suffer any consequence for bringing false charges, for consciously using and even paying for false evidence. Think of that. This has happened all over the country, my friends. Not only are they paying for witnesses, they're paying for false statements and for lying to judge and jury. As prosecutors are really held accountable, they employ illegal and unethical methods and routinely abuse their power. As judges are mainly concerned with clearing their court dockets, justice is rarely served in America, which explains why the United States has not only a large percentage of its citizens in prison than any other country on earth, but also the largest absolute number of prisoners. The U.S. actually has more of its citizens in prison than authoritarian China, which has a population over 4 times larger than the United States. The U.S. possibly has the greatest human rights abuser in history. It is constantly bringing human rights charges against China. Where are the human rights charges against Washington? My friends, the total population in the United States, as I said, is a little over 300 million. The last census that they had was, this includes illegals, is 314 million. We have 2.2 million in prison. Not to mention in the system, but in prison. China has a population of 1.3, excuse me, billion, with a B, and their prison population is 1.5 million. In America, the collapse of law has gone beyond corrupt prosecutors and their concocted false prosecutions. Unless it needs or desires a show trial, a police state does not need prosecutors and courts. By producing legal memos that the president can both throw people into prison without a trial and execute them without a trial, simply by stating that some official in the executive branch thinks that person has a possible or potential connection to terrorism, tyranny's friend in the Justice Department have dispensed with the needs for courts, prosecutors, and or trials. The Bush-Obama regime, see, he's putting them together, friends. He's putting these two together because there's no difference. Has made the executive branch judge, jury, and executioner. All that is needed is an unproven assertion by some executive branch official. We have the epitome of evil. Evidence is no longer required for the President of the United States to imprison people for life or to deprive them of their life. A secret Justice Department memo has been leaked to NBC News that reveals that tyrannical reasoning that authorizes the executive branch to execute American citizens on the basis of belief alone, without the requirement of evidence that they are terrorists or associated with terrorists. My friends, I think you get the gist of the article. It's rather lengthy, and unfortunately I have to stop here because I'm running out of time. But I would like to say one thing. I'm finished with one thing. As Glenn Greenwald writes, the most extremist power of any political leader can be asserted is the power to target his own citizens for execution without any charges or due process, far from any battlefield. I think that is exactly what's going on in this country today. Do you remember? We talked to you just last week. 30,000 drones ordered for the skies of the United States. 800 of them now currently in use that we know of. NDAA declares this a battlefield. The Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933 declares you the enemy. Department of Homeland Security, 2.316 billion rounds of ammo for practice. Desensitized targets, so when they look through their scopes, they're shooting at women, pregnant women, children, elderly. Folks, they don't call them desensitized targets for a lack of reason. It's just like these kids, and I call them kids, that have been grown up on playing with these electronic devices, and they're blowing up schools in Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Mali, the list goes on, Libya, Syria. And they're murdering innocents, butchering innocents. You know what it is to them? It's desensitized murder, my friends. They don't get to see the blood, hear the screams, hear the cries. It's a video game to them. an interesting thing, and I forget the name of the unfortunate person, but he was a prisoner of war. He was on a B-52 in Vietnam, and he was at the Hanoi Hilton. And one of the things they did with him at the Hanoi Hilton is they took him to one of the sites, civilian populations that, through the use of the B-52, I'm not saying his plane was particularly responsible for this, but see, he was a bombardier. He got to look through the little scope, make sure he was on target, and release the bombs. He didn't hear the cries, see the mayhem. It was a big psychological trauma event to this bombardier, Air Force officer, and he wrote about it very eloquently, and I remember reading it back in the 70s. And I didn't quite, I understood the gist of it, that, you know, him being so far away, 35,000 feet up, whatever, and not being at ground level to experience the horror that he was delivering to these innocents. And it's the same way with these kids on the video games. They're not there. They're not smelling the blood, the death. They're not hearing the cries. They're not watching the parents pick up their limbless children. And it's desensitized. And that's what these targets are about. And these targets are about who the target is. It is the American people. You have been declared the enemy. Your ground has been declared a battleground. We are facilitating a militarized domestic security force to quell you. We have camps now that are being facilitated. As I said, John Ashcroft called them internment camps. You may know them as FEMA camps. You know, it goes back to when the black helicopter started being in a civilian population around here, and you were a complete wacko if you thought you saw black helicopters. Now they acknowledge them. You thought you were a complete wacko if you acknowledged FEMA camps. You thought they were around. But now the Attorney General of the United States acknowledges them. My friends, Cyprus is the template. They have extracted all your intrinsic wealth. Now they are coming for what little is left of your sweat equity. And they have a domestic and foreign militarized force here in the United States to quell your future reaction when this takes place. The greatest robbery, the greatest heist in the history of mankind is about to take place. As I said before, when you rob a bank, it's a felony. It's called robbery. When the bank robs you, it's called a bailout. Or, as they're saying now in Cyprus, a bail-in. And it's coming out of you and into them. Because this was devised 100 years ago through the Federal Reserve banking system and all the central banking systems of Europe. We are in serfdom. My friends, as always, I wish we had more time for this program. We are very thankful that you take the time from your busy day to watch us. And we know that you are out there. We also know that a lot of you that watch this program are preparing. And for those of you that are not preparing, we ask you to please study history, study what we present to you. Go beyond what we're presenting to you. Research, find truth. History is a barometer as to the road that we are about to go down, and you must be prepared for it. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to join us. And we close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines.